guys, this is Harsh. Welcome back to Game Changers Podcast, inspiring conversations with leaders of tomorrow. I have with me my co-host Suki for the day with our guest Martin Kerr. Thanks, Martin, for coming on. I've known Martin for a while. He is, first of all, he's a fantastic musician, but he's also a fantastic soccer player. We played soccer for a couple months, and I didn't even know he was in the music industry until I found out about him, on social media, and I thought, I know this guy, so it's perfect. I already had an in with him, but I'd love for you to give an intro for yourself.
Well, thanks, Harsh. It's great to be here with you and Suki. Yeah, I'm originally from England, so I'm a half decent soccer player there. I'm I'm good by Canadian standards, but not so much back home. But yeah, I played every day, several times a day growing up, and also my second love was music. And to be honest, I couldn't split them. I love to play soccer every day and sing every day. And I managed to build a career for myself here as a musician, starting out on the street. And that's what I do full time now. It's been 12 years full time, and I'm really lucky to be able to get to make a living doing what I love.
Definitely. And you've had I want to congratulate you first of all, because your track, then your new song, Isolation Groove, has been doing really well. I was
Thanks.
watching the news the other day, and I was like, this guy's, is on Global. It was on a bunch of different news channels, and it was kind of unique how you found a way found a way to be creative and not become a victim of the situation, which I thought was really inspiring. Finding new opportunities, finding new ways to be creative and kind of use the situation to your advantage in whatever means possible.
Awesome. Yeah, it was actually really spontaneous. We had a recording session booked anyway. This would have been Friday, like the 19th of March, I think. And it was the day that things really started getting shut down here in Edmonton. They started announcing a bunch of business closures and school closures. And but I had this collaborations project underway. I'm doing an album of collaboration. So every song features a different local artist from here in Edmonton. And on this particular day, I had a session booked with Anne Breen, who's a fantastic blues soul singer-songwriter, and she tours all over the world, particularly in Europe and Australia. So while she was in town, I had her booked for this co-writing session at Velveteen Audio, a nice studio downtown. And so we were sitting there at like 10 in the morning with our morning coffee talking about what should we write today, and our phones kept pinging. And all these emails were coming in saying, this gig has been cancelled. Your tour of Europe has been cancelled. This summer festival has been cancelled. So all our plans that we had made for 2020 and had worked so hard for such a long time to put together were kind of being swept away. And so we decided right there and then that we needed to write something fun that day to cheer ourselves up, just to try and find some light in the situation. Although it's a very serious situation, in hard times, people more than ever, they need to laugh and sing and dance. So that's what the song's all about.
Yeah, and that's very true. And Harsh was telling me about how you started kind of doing neighborhood concerts and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
So, how hard was it for you to kind of adapt through isolation and kind of adapting your music and catering that towards what's going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, we're just taking one day at a time and responding to opportunities as they come, but also looking ahead to hope for the best but plan for the worst. And so the first thing really was to reduce our spending as a business, and secondly to keep finding ways to give, because music really is a service industry. We're bringing people feelings and experiences. We're bringing a bit of light and hope and joy into people's day. Even with the sad songs or the introspective ones, you're helping people to process their experiences and their emotions, and that can be a very cathartic thing. So just my business has always been built around bringing music to people instead of expecting them to come to me. And that's how I've been able to build a business from the streets in a place like Edmonton, where there isn't really much of a conventional music industry. The labels are not interested in what's going on in Edmonton. The music magazines are not writing about it. But there are a million people here who love music and need music. And if you can bring it to them where they are, I've always found that's a good way to start. And so, like many other musicians, I started off when this hit and all my gigs got cancelled. I started doing online streaming concerts on Facebook and YouTube. And honestly, I was overwhelmed. I was blown away by how generous people were. They really understood that it was a tough time for artists as much as anybody, financially speaking, and they really want to see artists keep going and keep being able to create and survive during this period. So fortunately, having done this for many years, I have an established fan base somewhat of a few thousand people, and lots of them tuned in and told their friends to tune in, and those who could contributed to the concert and doing things. It was kind of like being a street performer again, except through my phone instead of on the street. Mm-hmm. And people would just, some people would wander by and pop in for a few minutes and then leave again, and others would stay for the whole thing. And some people could afford to contribute and others couldn't. But when you open it up like that, when you give something and make it easy for people to give it back, good things have happened. And so those online concerts went really well. But I did find that as the weeks have gone on, the novelty started to wear off a little bit with those online concerts, because lots of people are doing them, including some huge names, like some of the biggest stars in the world are streaming live from their living rooms. So as people are scrolling through their Facebook or Instagram feeds, you're competing with all of those as well. So I wanted to find a way to bring it to people more directly and in a more personal way. And it kind of fell in our lap, actually, this opportunity to do these sidewalk concerts. I got an email through my website saying, I have a lovely balcony at my apartment, wondered if you could come and sing in the alleyway, and I can listen to you from my balcony, and I'll get a few neighbors together to chip in towards the cost. And I said, oh, that's a great idea. And it was just around the corner from my house. So she made me an offer, and we booked it in for just last Friday night. And then my manager said, this could be really something cool, so let's put it on Facebook. And he didn't even ask me, he just put it on Facebook saying, I'm doing sidewalk serenade concerts, who wants me to come to their block? And we started getting all these messages. And as soon as we actually did one and put it on Facebook Live, the requests started flooding in, and we've had dozens and dozens of communities, neighborhoods, blocks, asking if I can come and sing for them. And so it just started last Friday. This weekend we did 6 concerts, and this week starting tonight I have 10 more booked. We're booking into the middle of May already. So it's really cool because we found a way to be able to follow the social distancing protocol. Everybody can listen from their own property. So you can't call it a gathering if everyone's still at home. They're listening from their balcony or their window or their driveway or their front lawn. And I set up on the street in front of their houses and play my songs. And I bring us a little speaker system. They just have to throw an extension cable out to me in the road, and I plug in and play. And then people contribute what they can by e-transfer or by tossing an envelope in my guitar case. And we've been doing really well.
I've seen those videos too. Like I've seen a couple of those videos on your Instagram where everyone in the neighborhood is kind of, cheering for you, and they're all singing along. And I think it was someone's maybe an event, and there's like a bunch of different all the neighbors are out and they're clapping and singing and chiming in, and it was really amazing how we're still able to connect like that, and you were able to bring that joy to people through your music even during these times of adversity. And like you said, these are the times when we need it the most, right? These are the times when we need to laugh and smile and have those moments with our loved ones. And I think you're one of the people that are making this happen in our city. So that's super, super exciting. But wanting to go from there to, I know you talked about a love for your music, right? And I want to dive into your past a little bit. And
Sure.
Obviously we talked about how you've been doing things now, but when you started, how was this for you? Like, what really sparked that love for music? Like, what is it about music that really matters to you? And what was the start like for you?
Ever since I can remember, I loved to sing. And my parents would play music in the house, and they'd sing me to sleep, and we'd sing while we were in the car, and we'd sing while we were doing the dishes. And neither of them were trained musicians, but they loved music, and they would share with me the music that they loved, the Beatles and James Taylor and Simon and Garfunkel. And stuff of the time. This would have been mid-80s. I was growing up, Peter Gabriel and Tracy Chapman. So I just grew up singing. And when I was 5 years old, I got given a part in the school play, the school Christmas play. It was called Snow Robin, and I was given the lead role. And my parents had no idea that I had a big part, but they came along to the school concert, and it turned out that I was the star of the show, this little 5-year-old boy. And I noticed and I felt the atmosphere in the room change when I sang these songs. People had tears in their eyes, and they were saying wow to each other. And I'd never felt so fulfilled in my life, I guess, that as a little boy, to have this power over people's emotions with my voice and to make them feel something really good, was a feeling I wanted again and again. And ever since then, I knew that I wanted to be a singer. So my parents were pretty blown away that that I had this talent. They'd always knew that I liked to sing, but they didn't realize I could have this impact on people. So they were very supportive of me growing up, giving me opportunities to learn instruments and be in choirs and to drive me to musical theatre practices in the evenings and stuff. So I grew up with lots of opportunities. It was a very small town that I lived in, but there were lots of chances to be involved in the arts. And so alongside my soccer practice, I managed to squeeze in lots of fun stuff and started a band when I was 13 and started writing my own songs. But I always had it in the back of my mind, because people would always say, what's your plan B, or what are you going to do for a living? Because you can't make money as a musician, or you've got to have a golden ticket. People think you need a miracle to make it as a musician. You need to be in the right place at the right time, or be signed to a multi-million-dollar record contract. And so that kind of made me want to prove people wrong. When the time came for me to go to university, I didn't go. I went traveling around the world instead, with a guitar on my back, and sang in restaurants and bars and hotels to get free rooms and free meals, and made a lot of friends that way. So
walk us through that experience, because I remember you telling me, you had at a time in your life when you're 18, you had the opportunity to travel the world, and with your music, but also just as on a level of personal growth, right? You said you went to all these countries, and you lived in homes of these local families, and you got to see the culture and the way of lives of these people, and really have a perspective of outside of where you live, and see what the world is actually like. Walk us through what that experience was like for you.
Well, first of all, it was kind of a really interesting time for me. I was graduating high school, my final year, and my parents announced that they were going to sell the house and move to China. They wanted a new adventure, and as their youngest kid graduating, they were ready to leave. I had a few months to get used to this idea, but I was quite resistant to it at first. But to kind of sweeten the deal, my dad bought me this round the world ticket. And he said, if you study hard and you get straight A's in your finals, I'll pay for everything, and you can go the day after high school. And if you don't get straight A's, then you need to get a summer job and work until this is paid off, and then you can go. So I studied hard, I got my A's, I went off around the world. And he had set me up with the route in places where he knew people. So I could stay with families in communities and be involved in stuff when I went to these places, instead of just staying in hostels and going around tourist sites. And to me, that was a much more profound experience, to experience these countries and cultures as a member of the community instead of as a tourist. So I stayed in Samoa, and I went into the jungle with this scientist who was teaching the people there about agriculture and how to grow their own cash crops. And I stayed in Samoa, and I stayed with a doctoral student who was a friend of my parents, who was studying the religions of Samoa. And we traveled out to the outlying villages and sang with the people there and danced with the people there. And I got to see so many different ways of life, and to see that some of the people with the least in terms of material goods or monetary wealth were in some ways living the best lives and had the richest communities, where everybody could sing and dance, and they did every day. And they ate fresh food that they caught themselves that morning. And it was quite inspiring to see all the different ways that you can build a life. So that kind of, it gave me a lot of ideas and inspiration for choosing my own path later on.
Fantastic.
Sorry, you said go ahead.
Go ahead.
Awesome. So no, I just wanted to actually touch on that. And, you know, I think it's amazing that, you know, you went out of high school and, you know, started experiencing all these things in the heart of the community, right? Because there's a lot of, you know, you can learn in, you know, by reading a book or something like that, where, you know, you can read about experiences, but they're different than, you know, you actually being in that circumstance and experiencing it for yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Experiencing for that stuff give you, you know, that new insight and new knowledge as to, you know, you said it best actually, having, you know, a different view on life. You know, the richest people have, you know, they don't necessarily have all these materialistic things, right? And I think you said that best. And, you know, what would you say is, would you say that, you know, people should be traveling more? Or do you think, you know, education is, you know, more of the right way or right path for people to go after high school?
Well, it's certainly a great privilege to have been able to travel the world at a young age, and not everybody will have that privilege, whether they lack the means or the right passport. And so I don't take that for granted. But there's certainly other ways to experience the cultures of the world. And now that I live in Canada, here in Edmonton, we have the whole world on our doorstep in many ways. There's peoples and cultures from all over the world mixing here. And it's a very friendly place where you can get to know people from all around the world. So you can almost experience those cultures right on your doorstep. Although at this time, of course, it's more difficult to mix and mingle. Hopefully, this won't last too long, and eventually we'll get back to being able to visit each other's homes and places of worship and businesses and all of those things. So yeah, I do absolutely recommend it. And I'm very grateful to my parents, because we were not a wealthy family by Western standards. My parents both came from working class backgrounds, and my mum was a elementary teacher, which is a job that's not nearly as well paid in Britain as it is here. And though they should be paid more here as well, I think. And my dad worked for a charity publishing religious literature for the Baha'i faith. So I grew up in a Baha'i household. And for them, the most important thing was that I grew up with a consciousness that the whole world is one home, and that all the world's peoples are my family. So my dad had a map of the world on my bedroom wall since forever. It's one of the first things I remember is he would teach me all the countries and continents and capitals and the flags and all that stuff since I was 4 or 5 years old. And so I wanted to go to those places and experience these cultures and meet these people and hear their stories and their songs ever since I was a little boy. And anytime we had any extra money, we would spend it on traveling and visiting people. So that was a wonderful way to be raised, even though I grew up in a very small provincial town with almost no cultural diversity. I was able to experience the world in other ways. So I thank my parents for that, and I hope to be able to pass that on to my kids too.
Fantastic, and I completely agree with that. You know, I've also had the opportunity to travel to some countries, and seeing, you know, people make the most out of, you know, just the smallest things and find happiness in the little things in their life, and, you know, just living a life of so much joy that you, in comparison, you would see a lot more joy than even someone who has a lot of resources, materialism, and opportunity. So I completely agree with you, and I think it's a must-have experience for anyone to get that perspective on life and how, you know, people live around the world. But, you know, fast forward in your life, you know, 4 years down, there you are dropping out of university and moving to Edmonton with $20 in your pocket. Tell us about that experience. That's a pretty bold move at such a young age. What was going through your mind at that time, and what inspired you to make that decision?
Well, just to give you the background, after my year traveling around the world, I decided to settle in Beijing for 2 years, and I studied Chinese for 1 year, and then I got a job as a preschool teacher. And during that time, I I met a lot of great people, but I happened to meet a young lady from Edmonton at a party one night, and we chatted for a few hours, and I kind of got the feeling that she liked me, but I wasn't really looking at that point. I was actually in love with somebody else at the time, and so I wasn't interested. But a couple of years later, she got in touch with me, and by this time, I was going to school, going to university in the States. I'd been offered a scholarship by another great person that I'd met in China, and so I was 1 year away from getting a degree, and that scared me, because once you have a degree, you might end up with a real job, and I just wanted to be a singer. So there was two reasons that I decided to drop out. One was that I didn't want to go down that path of conventional, working for other people. I really wanted to be a musician, and I wanted to be my own boss. And also, I had fallen in love with Tara, this girl from Edmonton, long distance. We've been keeping in touch, and what attracted me to her was her incredible directness. Well, there were many, many things that attracted me to her, but the first thing really was that she wrote to me and said, "Hey, Martin," this was after 2 years of not talking to her. We just, been doing our own thing. She wrote to me and said, "Hey, Martin, I'm thinking about the kind of person I might like to spend my life with, and I made this chart of all the guys I know and all the qualities I'm looking for, and you got the most points. So what do you think about that?" And I thought, wow, that's crazy, because we hardly know each other, but it's also really cool to start a relationship with so much openness and honesty about what you're looking for and who you are. And it gave me a lot of confidence to be talking to somebody who knew what they wanted in life and knew who they wanted to spend it with and why. And it wasn't just, let's see what happens, let's wait and see, let's see how we feel. Because I don't think you can really live life like that. I mean, I like to be spontaneous and respond to things in the moment, but you also have to decide what you want and go for it. And so she was doing that with me. And the more I got to know her, the more I liked her. She came to visit me, I went to visit her, and soon after we decided to get married. So I dropped out of university and I moved to Edmonton with literally $20 in my pocket. And she was a student at the time, going to the U of A for law. And so she had some student loans that we lived off very modestly in a one-bedroom apartment. And I basically volunteered for the first year because I didn't have a work permit. I volunteered teaching a children's choir and going to open mics, sharing my songs with people. And just getting to know the community here in Edmonton. I was really pleasantly surprised with how friendly and helpful people were. So as soon as I got my work permit, I started trying to get paid gigs at little cafes and charity events and stuff, and eventually decided to hit the streets. I used to go to the farmers market around the corner from where I lived, and I saw buskers there doing quite well, and thought I could try that. So I tried it and got good at it, persevering, finding ways to sound better and to make it easier for people to help me. I found as a busker, of course, you've got to sing people a beautiful song and brighten their day, but you also have to tell them what to do. So I would open up my guitar case, as buskers usually do, but I'd also put a sign there saying, "Take a CD, pay what you like." And in brackets, I would say they're $20 in stores. So lots of people would drop a 20 and take a CD. Some people would drop a toonie or a 5, but it all worked out to a pretty generous donation. And some people would just give money and take nothing. And I had another card that said, "Available for events, take a card." And a big stack of business cards with my number and a list of the kind of events that I do. And so through playing on the street at the market, and all the cards that people took and the CDs that people took, my calendar very quickly filled up with paid gigs for the whole year. Even though busking was just a summer job, the gigs that I got from busking kept me busy year round. And I found myself playing for all different kinds of people. Usually as a musician, you're trying to play the music venues, the few bars and clubs that have regular live music and are known for that. But there's only a certain kind of people or a certain sliver of the population that actually goes to those places. But by doing these events for people's birthday parties and anniversaries and client appreciations and staff appreciations and charity events, I was playing for all different kinds of people of all different ages and backgrounds and cultures. And so I found I had a very diverse fan base here in Edmonton. And now, having done that for many years, anytime I leave the house in Edmonton, I bump into somebody who says, "You played at my nan's 90th birthday," or "You played my sister's wedding," or "I saw you playing at the market." And it's such a nice way to experience a very modest level of fame that all these people feel like they're my friends because I played for them in a very intimate setting. And they want to help me because they see that I'm an ordinary guy trying to make a living doing something good.
For sure. And I've heard, you said you've been busking for about what, 10 years or so. You had bus for
Yeah.
10 years. So, and I think it's really insane because I think it requires an insane amount of humility and an insane amount of, I guess, passion for, whatever your craft is, to say, hey, I don't care about other people's judgment, because there's family members, everyone's going to say to you, you're still on the street, there's been so much time, what about career, get a job? And there's so much judgment and so much pressure that you get from people who expect you to live a normal life, right? But
Yeah.
Staying committed and being humble and knowing you need to do what you need to do for yourself, I
Yeah.
think that's amazing. I just think
Thank you.
that's one of the most brilliant things I've heard and I've seen anyone do, is performing at a street level for 10 years, having the humility to do that on the street and ask people for donations, and do that for 10 years and build up an audience and credibility to get to a stage where now you're performing at Winspear Center, you have a show for Jubilee Auditorium, you had a performance at Rogers Place, your album hit #2 on iTunes chart. So I think it's insane that consistency and that humility led to something so amazing for you.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey for me because I certainly didn't expect those things to happen. I had some dreams, but to me they were dreams, things like playing at the Winspear, playing with the symphony orchestra, opening for Sarah McLachlan at Rogers Place. Those are things that I've been able to do in the last few years that I really thought were out of reach for me and that would take a miracle. But actually, they've fallen into my lap as a result of the very humble work that I did on the streets. And it doesn't have to be as humble as you think. Maybe when people think of a street performer, they might think of someone sitting in a doorway of a store on White Ave, strumming their guitar with a few coins in their case. But that wasn't the approach I took. I wanted to take music to people in a place and time where they had the opportunity to really listen. And so that's why I went to the farmers market instead of just on a busy street corner, because people are not in a hurry to get anywhere. When they go to the farmers market on a summer Saturday, they're going there to enjoy the culture. They're going there to buy expensive organic apples instead of the cheap ones from the supermarket, and to enjoy the sunshine and to see the community. And they want to hang out and they've got cash in their pocket. So it made a lot of sense for me to be there. And honestly, the markets that we have in Edmonton, the two big ones, the Strathcona one and the City Market on 104th Street, which has now moved, and also the St. Albert one. These are big markets. They get 10, 20,000 people on a Saturday. And, where else as an independent musician can you reliably go and play for 20,000 people with no advertising? It was an incredible opportunity to get in front of those people. And of course, you do need to be humble because lots of people will breeze right by you or step over your guitar case or ask you to turn down or not to play that song again. So you have to develop a very thick skin. But there's also an incredible amount of positive feedback. When you see little children dancing or old ladies that come and listen to you in the same spot every single week and stay for the whole show. And the people that come up and talk to you afterwards and say how much they were moved by your song, like with tears in their eyes. It's like, wow, I just sang a song, but it really touched this person's heart and changed their day. So I made some fans for life and friends for life playing on the street. And it's incredible. There's so many things that you don't even know could possibly happen until you put yourself out there and try and offer something to the community. And and I think a lot of musicians, and I count myself in this, have spent too much time being afraid of what might happen and not excited about what might happen. Because there's a lot of uncertainty in any business venture, but there should be at least as much excitement as fear in that. And if you prepare something, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be sincere, and it has to have some value. And you take it to people. When you deliver it, you go through that process of trial and error, finding what works, what doesn't, and improving every time. And good things always come of that.
As an artist now, you inspire a whole generation of people, right? And so I'm curious to know as to who inspired you when you were younger, or even now in this day and age, who inspires you and who touches you to the degree that you touch other people with your music?
That's a good question. There's a few famous artists that I grew up listening to that I really loved. Usually singer-songwriters. I like music where the lyrics were really key, and that the lyrics are kind of good enough to stand up as poetry on their own. People like Joni Mitchell and Neil Young and James Taylor, Bill Withers. I loved stuff that I could sing along to. There was some more exciting stuff that I liked, like Smashing Pumpkins and Queen. But generally it was the kind of mellow acoustic stuff that I could see myself doing with my guitar. And that was the reason I picked up a guitar, was so that I could perform by myself. And growing up, I'd had a few experiences of being very up close and personal with musicians who played the guitar and sang, like around a campfire. I used to go to these summer schools and arts retreats and stuff that my parents would send me to through the Baha'i community. And there would always be music evenings, and there would be somebody with a guitar that would start singing, sometimes original songs, sometimes prayers or pop songs. And just the feeling that they were able to have on that small gathering around the campfire, the sense of excitement and realness in the air was something that just really set my nerves tingling, and I wanted to have that feeling again, and I wanted to be able to give that feeling to other people. So I've always loved very intimate music by ordinary people. And my CD collection, although I don't tend to use it as much as I used to, is mostly populated by people you've never heard of, people that I've met at a festival or a singer-songwriter night or an open mic that I've traded CDs with. I've always been more interested in people that I can actually meet rather than the people in the magazines or on the radio. Obviously, there's lots of great people out there, but I'm really interested in the fact that there's so many incredibly talented people that are not household names. So one of my early songs that I wrote in university was called Undiscovered Geniuses. And I wrote it in the middle of the night after I'd just been to an open mic at a coffee shop. And I was just blown away by this CD of poetry, spoken word poetry that I'd been given by one of the artists there. And I wanted to write a song about how incredible it is that there's so much talent in the world that will never become famous or rich. And I want to spend my life looking for that talent.
Well, let's actually talk about, your name was mentioned with some of the great talents. Your song was, your album was #2 on iTunes chart, right? Just Sheeran and, right below Imagine Dragons. And so what was that like for you?
It was pretty crazy. And without downplaying it too much, because it was a real dream come true for me to see that happen. This was at a time, 2017 summer, I released this album in conjunction with my big show with Sarah McLachlan. So not only did I get all of my fans and friends to buy the album on the same week, which numbered a few thousand people, I got all the people inside Rogers Place to hold up their phones on my last song. And I said, you can only, I was singing Hallelujah as my closing song. And I said, you can only set your torch on and wave it if you've bought my album on iTunes first. So we got hundreds and hundreds of people waving their phones, and I think most of them must have bought the album because, I got to #2 the next morning. I was actually above Ed Sheeran for one day, which was pretty cool. And so obviously this is at a time when iTunes was not the biggest dog in town anymore, but I was still incredibly flattered and humbled to be able to see my name alongside those great names. And really just from one place, the power of a fan base in one city. Because outside of Edmonton, there's not that many people that know me. I've had a little bit of airplay on CBC and a couple of national TV spots on Global and stuff, but basically 90% of my audience is in Edmonton. And even that is something special. It's very special to me. And it really works for me because one of the hardest things about being a musician is having a family as well. And people often find they have to choose between having a family and having a music career, because most musicians are constantly on the road trying to eke out a living playing gigs all over the continent, or all over the world sometimes. But for me, that was never an option, because I had a wife that I loved, that I wanted to be with, and we wanted to have kids. Now I have 3 young kids at home, ages 10, 7, and 4. And I don't want to miss their childhood being on the road. So I'm missing it instead doing podcasts with you. Now I'm able to work from home and see them every day and read them stories at night, which is a great gift because my audience is concentrated in my hometown. I'm playing 3, 4, sometimes 10 times a week within half an hour of my front door. So I kind of designed it that way, and it kind of happened by chance as well, because that was all I had time to do, was work on my local market. It's turned out really well. It's not a conventional way to have a music career, and it certainly means that a lot of the record labels and stuff, even after having a top 10 album, are not interested in me, because they want somebody that can make them money all over the world. But that's fine by me. I'm not really bothered about getting signed. I'm much more interested on the impact I can have upon the people I'm singing for in my community.
For sure. And I remember you telling me that as well, where it's super important for you to have that balance, where you've never wanted to be on, one of those world tours. You just want to, make a living doing what you love and have a family family life that you've always wanted. But,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, how did you get to that point? What's that gap in the middle where a guy from, the $20 in his pocket moves to Edmonton, at such a young age, is a street performer, but now is at a point where you're beating Ed Sheeran on the charts, performing at Rogers Place, Winspear Center, selling out these shows, and it's somewhat, someone would call it bizarre. If someone saw you 10 years from, when you're 22 performing at the farmers market, no one would predict, that would ever happen. So what's that journey been like for you? What's that gap in the middle from that finish to where that start was? What's really got you through that?
Well, a big change happened for me about 4 years ago, when a friend of mine from my soccer team, actually, he wasn't even really a friend, he was a guy I played soccer with, and we didn't even get on that well, was looking for a new place to live. He said, does anyone know about someone renting a room? And I actually had a spare room in my basement that had just been vacated, and we were trying to rent it out. So he asked if he could come check it out. I said, sure. And he ended up moving in to our spare room. And at the time, he worked at the bank full-time as a loans manager and delivered pizzas in the evenings to help support his young daughter. And he lived with us for a year, and didn't really show much interest in my music. I was gigging all the time, and he would see me leaving the house with my guitar and coming back with some money. So he knew I must be doing okay, but he never expressed much interest in my music. But a year later, his grandma was visiting. She actually just passed away a couple of weeks ago, unfortunately. But I gave him 2 tickets to this show that I had. I had a theatre show at the Citadel, and it was a charity event opening for Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo, who's kind of a big deal here in Canada, of people from the 90s. And I thought she might like my show, because I tend to do very well with older ladies for some reason. They like what I do. So I gave him these tickets and said, bring your nan out to my show. I think she'll really like it. So he said, okay. And he brought her out. And I worked really hard on this set for this show, because it was a big opportunity for me to open for someone like Jim Cuddy at a beautiful theatre. Usually I was playing in people's living rooms and backyards or on the street. And so I put a lot of effort into this set, and and especially into the things that I was going to say in between my songs to kind of weave it all together, the stories I was going to tell. And I got people laughing and crying and singing along, and at the end of my set, on their feet with a standing ovation, which doesn't always happen for an opening act. And I had offered myself to the event. I said, I'll give you a house concert to auction off during the intermission. So this guy from the radio came up to auction me off. And usually, I was thinking we might raise a few $100 extra for the charity. And it went for $5,000, which to me was an unimaginable amount of money at the time for the street performer. And so, and at the end of the show, I was selling CDs as fast as I could get them out of the box. And my friend Anthony, who lived in my basement, came to help me at the CD desk. He says, "Man, this is amazing. I didn't know you were so good." And so he was really impressed with the impact that I'd had on that audience. And the next day, we were pushing our daughters on the swings at the park. And he said, "Dude, you should be doing more with your career. Why are you still playing on the street?" And I said, "Well, I want to do these theaters all the time, but I don't get the opportunity. And I've always wanted to book my own theater show, but I feel like it would be too much work and too much risk to do by myself because I'm just a one-man operation." He said, "Well, I'll help you. Let's do it together." And so with his help and his confidence, I put down a deposit on a 500-seat theater called Festival Place. And he came with me to every single backyard party and every single street performance for the whole summer for 6 weeks, and set up a little table to sell tickets to people who liked my music. And with that method, we were able to sell all 500 tickets and pack that house. And that I was so nervous for that show. It was my first ever kind of solo show that I put on myself at a real theater. And it was an incredible experience for me. It was a real landmark to be able to do that. And I felt like suddenly I had a real business. And so we took that money that we made on that show and we put it down $4,000 as the deposit on the Winspear Center, which was the theater I really wanted to play. I played a couple songs there before for a charity event, and it's the most beautiful theater. It's where the symphony orchestra plays. The acoustics are incredible. It seats 1,700 people. And so we gave ourselves 6 months to sell that place using the same method. At all my house concerts, we'd sell tickets to people to come to the big show. Once they'd seen me in that intimate arena of someone's backyard or living room, and I'd been able to kind of touch their heart with my songs and stories, they really bought into that dream that I had. And it really was my dream to have a sold out show at this big theater. And so we did it. We sold it out 1,700 seats. And suddenly, the music industry in Alberta and beyond started to notice me and take me seriously. So I wasn't just a street performer anymore. I was the guy that sold out the Winspear Center. And there's lots of major label acts that struggle to sell out a venue of that size. So it was really quite an achievement in other people's eyes, as well as something that I was very, very proud of. And my audience, who had been cheering me on the sidewalk for many years, were so excited to see me living out my dreams in that way. And it really gave everything a big boost and created a new sense of value and legitimacy about what I was doing. And so using that platform, we were able to do things like getting an album in the top 10 and being offered the opening spot for Sarah McLachlan. That actually came from somebody who had seen me at the market. And every time he walked by, he said, "Martin Kerr, I've got big plans for you." And nothing ever came of it until one day I got this phone call saying, "How would you like to open for Sarah McLachlan?" So,
and I feel like a big chunk of everything that happened for you was from, you know, this group, this community of people that you've built for yourself over, you know, your years of busking, and you've met these people for so long and you've performed for them, and you know, they kind of had this connection with you where they trusted your they trusted your credibility, they trusted your love for music, and they wanted to invest in that, and they saw your potential, and they saw the, you know, the experience you were able to create. And I think that's a huge part of, you know, how you bust for so many times, but you built these really intimate connections with all these individuals that ended up, you know, numbering up to thousands of people over so many years. And these are the people that, like you said, you know, big companies struggle to, you know, sell theaters like that, but you were able to do it, you know, just through these connections that you built over the years.
Absolutely. I try to see each person as a human being and value the relationship. Like when people come up to buy a CD, I want to ask them their name and take a minute just to talk to them, um, and make them feel that I really do value their support, because I do, because I actually depend on it. And without that, I don't have a career, and my songs don't get heard by anybody. So um, I think people feel the fact that I genuinely appreciate them, and they want to come back and feel that again. So I also try to write songs in a very honest way, and maybe about things that you might not typically hear songs about. Like songs about that. I have a song called "A Little Longer" that's inspired by my kids growing out of their clothes and their bikes and stuff, and wanting them to stay a little longer. And so people my age in their 30s who have little kids or older whose kids have already grown up really relate to that song. And it's probably not a song that you'd hear on the radio because it's not cool, but it's very honest and very real. And that's something that people appreciate.
And it's really
About
authentic, and like people really resonate with that, right? Especially when
That's
you put
right.
a lot of emotion, and there's it's not just a made up story, it's your story, and you put in actual, you paint a picture for them, you make them feel things that you felt, and that's really what connects people through music. That's the language of music, where you can, through your words, and through the way you say them, you can connect to people and share your authenticity,
Hmm.
share your stories, and share, and
Absolutely.
they resonate with that.
Yeah.
But going
And
off
I
of that,
also, yeah, sure.
I'm curious to know, because I want you to, because there's so many new, because our major audience is millennials and Gen Zs, and a lot of
Mhm.
these are headed towards the music industry, looking to build a
Yep.
career in that. And for us, it's really important because we want to. I would call you definitely a successful, a hugely successful musician, and I want to hear what your advice is to these younger musicians that are coming out, these artists, and how they can really build a successful career in the music industry.
Yeah, obviously, I don't have anything prescriptive because I'm just one example, and I can tell you what worked for me, and you might have to find something different that works for you, especially working in different genres. One thing that's worked in my favor for sure is that the kind of music I play is not really offensive to anybody. And it can be adapted to all different ages and environments and events. And so that's made me very flexible as a performer. Even though I'm mostly doing the same thing, I can do it for all different kinds of people and events, and it still works. Whereas if you're playing a more extreme kind of music, it maybe doesn't fit in a lot of places. So that's something that's an advantage to me. And I think that's a conscious choice on my part. That's what I'm naturally attracted to as a listener as well. But I've always liked things that bring people together instead of dividing them into a subsection of the people who like this kind of thing. Um, and I'm much more interested in playing for people who don't consider themselves music fans, because music fans I find are actually very fickle people, and they're like, impress me. They're not easily impressed because they know so much already and they know so many great musicians. I'm much more interested in playing for the people who love music but they don't really know much about it, or they don't know why they love it, because there's a lot more of those people out there, and they're underserved, I find, because they're not typically going out to the music venues. And if you bring the music to them, they're like, wow, I do love music, So that's something that has served me well, is that attitude and that flexibility. And also being willing to play popular covers. It's something that musicians sometimes look down on, because they want to play their original music, and original music is so valuable, and I love to play my original songs. But learning other people's songs has been a great education for me, and also, especially playing on the street, I found that playing something recognizable will stop people in their tracks. It's like it evokes a memory in them when you hear that song that they heard at a certain time in their life, and it makes them stop. And then you have their attention, and you can give them something original as well. So I've used that dynamic in all of my performances now. I always throw in at least one or two popular covers that will connect with people in a slightly different way and be a point of commonality between us. So I find that in business, in all kinds of businesses and industries, you're trying to give something familiar and something innovative at the same time and balance those two factors. My wife says it's like when A&W brings out a new burger, it's like exactly the same as the old burger with a slightly different sauce, you know, or a different kind of cheese. You know, you don't have to innovate very much to be original. You need to give people enough of what they know and work in that context. So I don't feel like I'm really breaking many barriers, but you can really have a breakthrough with something simple. And to take that into a marketing perspective for a second, or a sales perspective, in recent years, CD sales have absolutely plummeted, as everybody knows. Most people don't even have a CD player anymore. And that used to be my biggest income driver, was the CD sales at my gigs and at the market. And so as those started to dry up, we had to find a new way to repackage my recorded music. And we came up with these USB sticks. A lot of people are selling USB drives and thumb drives, but they're not very exciting and they're not very personal. So I'm just trying to see if I have one here. Give me 1 sec. I know I've got one in a box somewhere. Let me see. Oh darn! I'll have to send you a picture of one or something.
For sure.
But they're like this big and they look like me. You can get custom USB drives made. We sent a photograph of me to this USB maker, and they sent back this little miniature Martin Kerr. It's like a little action figure or something, and it splits in half at the middle. So when you open it up, it actually looks like you're taking off my pants. So we make a joke of that at the gigs, we put everything I've ever recorded on it, including some unreleased stuff, live albums, covers albums, original albums, full band stuff, acoustic stuff. So people that really love my music and want to get the whole experience can take it home with them in this fun little package. And instead of selling $10 or $20 CDs, we're now selling $50 USBs, and people still feel like they're getting a great deal because there's 9 albums on there. And they also feel that they're really supporting me, which they are. So I found that it's really, really important to give people a high value proposition or opportunity to support you in a substantial way. So doing things like pay what you like concerts that we've been doing online lately, and these street concerts that I'm doing are also pay what you can. So you'd be amazed how much people want to give sometimes if you give them the opportunity. If the only thing you're selling is a $20 CD or a $10 t-shirt, then that's all you're going to make. But if you give people the opportunity to give more, you might be surprised how many people want to.
For sure. Completely agree with everything you're saying. So, you know, as we move towards our close for the podcast, we always ask every guest this one question. You know, what is one word that describes a game changer for you, or that's allowed you to be successful in your career in the music industry?
One word?
Yep.
Is that wow? Okay. Respond. I think you can take that in many, many ways. It's so important to respond when people make a comment on your Facebook post, when people come up to you to tell you how they felt after your show, when you get a piece of fan mail, when something in your industry changes, you have to respond, to innovate, to do something different in response to that crisis or opportunity, however you choose to see it. So being alive to the possibilities in each moment, I think, is what that word respond means. And for me as a performer, I have to be responsive to the moment of the performance. And that's what really makes you a good performer, I think. Not only the rehearsal and the talent that you have to have, but being alive to the audience in the moment of the performance, and being alive to the song and actually experiencing the feelings that the song evokes as you're performing it. So that's the word I would choose.
Awesome. And Martin, where can people find your music online?
Well, martinkerrmusic.com, martinkerr.com. is my website, and you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. And my handle is @MartinKerrMusic.
And also
of course,
on Spotify and Apple.
Absolutely, yeah. All the streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple, Amazon.
On Spotify, I have a couple of his songs. I'm a huge fan of, you know, house and electronic music. That's what I grew up with.
Oh, cool.
And your remix for Enemy, yeah. When you had a couple of people from, you know, you told me Singapore that made those remixes, and they're really great. So I listen to that remix all the time, actually. So
nice.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, well, thank you so much for being on. It was lovely, you know, getting to know your journey. Obviously, I guess I know you on the pitch, but now now I know you off the pitch as well. And and I wanted to share your story of how amazing it is, and it's kind of hopeful in the sense of, you know, in a city like Edmonton, it is still possible to really make a living out of, you know, doing what you love. And I think you're an inspiration for, you know, upcoming artists and musicians, and a way of, you know, how to take it as a music career, and how to behave, and how to be a performer, and what it really means to be humble. And, you know, that's the one where I see you. That's the one word I would choose to, and what I see you as, you know, someone with extreme humility. So
thank you so much, Harsh.
Your energy and your time today, and thanks for coming on.
That's really kind of you. Thanks for having me, and I hope this was useful. And actually, if people are watching on YouTube, it's great if you can hop onto my channel and check out one of my videos. There's a couple of fun ones that I think you'll enjoy, and maybe share with somebody.
Link in the description, guys.
For sure. All right. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. That's your episode with Martin Kerr. This is myself, Harsh, and we will see you guys on the next one. Take care. Stay safe. Stay inspired.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.